Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, depending on where you are today. My name is Jakub Nowakowski, and I'm a director of the Cape Town Holocaust and Genocide Center. And it is my pleasure to welcome all of you and to thank you for spending this, again, morning, afternoon, or evening with us during a very special program, Stories from Vilna Ghetto. The program is happening today as almost exactly 80 years ago, the Vilna Ghetto was liquidated on September 23rd and 24th of 1943. And during this program, we want to, among others, to commemorate those horrible moments. And I'm delighted that we're organizing this program in collaboration with wonderful partners, Teach the Shoah and the YIVO Institute. Now I'd like to introduce and pass the floor, or perhaps a mic, to our partner, Beba Epstein, the president of the Teach the Shoah. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you, Jakub. As Jakub said, this is Stories from the Vilna Ghetto, and I'm Beba Epstein, the president of Teach the Shoah. I am honored to have with me tonight Jonathan Brent, the Executive Director and CEO of the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research, and Richard Freedman, the Chair of the Board of Trustees of the Cape Town Holocaust and Genocide Center. And you already met Jakub, the Director of the Cape Town Holocaust and Genocide Center. We'll be hearing from Jonathan and Richard a little later in the program. We're also very excited to have with us two amazing storytellers, Karolina Zolkowski, Chief Curator of the YIVO Bruce and Francesca Chernia-Slovin Online Museum, and Nokuzola Bikwana, educator at the Cape Town Holocaust and Genocide Center. I'd like to introduce a couple of other people to you before we get started. Orly Barnett, Cape Town's Education Director, Shelley Friedman, YIVO's Chief of Staff, Jennifer Zunikoff, Teach the Shoah's Storytelling Director, and Lynn Feldman, Teach the Shoah's International Coordinator and Director of Holocaust Scholarship. Lynn is running tech for us tonight, so thank you, Lynn. I am also incredibly honored to introduce to you Zola Schumann, who is Leyb Rosenthal's niece. We will be hearing Leyb Rosenthal's story from Nokuzola in a little bit. Zola Schumann was instrumental in putting together the Vilna exhibit that we'll be talking about from Cape Town. I also want to mention that we have with us in our audience Tali Nates, the director of the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center. So we are happy to have you with us as well. And we are happy to have all of you with us. We're very excited to bring this program to you. Today, we are going to explore the power and importance of storytelling for preserving Holocaust memory, especially in conjunction with in-person and online museum exhibits. The power of Holocaust storytelling lies in its ability to educate, to raise awareness, and to promote empathy and understanding. By sharing personal accounts and experiences, Holocaust storytelling helps us to preserve the memory of victims and survivors, ensuring that these stories are not forgotten. It also serves as a reminder of the atrocities that were committed during this very dark period in history, promoting a commitment to preventing such horrors from happening again. And Holocaust storytelling can inspire reflection and encourage individuals to confront prejudice, discrimination, and injustice in their own lives and in their communities. In a museum setting, Holocaust storytelling can be used to create powerful and educational experiences for our visitors. We see this in the online and in-person exhibits put on by YIVO and the Cape Town Holocaust and Genocide Center that we're going to be talking about tonight. But we're going to start tonight with two stories connected to these exhibitions. This is Stories from the Vilna Ghetto, because both exhibitions and both stories focus on Vilna, Lithuania. Our first story comes from Karolina Zolkowski. Karolina will be telling a story from the life of Beba Epstein. Beba was born and raised in Vilna. She was the only member of her immediate family to survive the war. Later immigrated to the United States, where she built a family and spent the rest of her life in Los Angeles, California. Carolina, whenever you're ready.
I'm in hiding. It is 1941, the year I turned 18 years old. My family is all in the ghetto. My mother, my father, my 3 younger siblings. My younger brother is only 8 years old. I'm with a family that my father met in the Russian army. I correspond with my family through letters. At some point, they cease. I'm very worried, so I decide that I'll go into the ghetto voluntarily to see what happened. I hope that they're okay. When I get there, I learned that they were all sent to Ponari and murdered. I find some other people. I find my cousin, and he helps me get a good job. I'm working in the gardens of one of the religious orders that were taken over by the Germans. I can spend time outside. There are very few Germans. I tend to the vegetables, to the incubator chickens. It gives a sense of normalcy. 2 years later, the ghetto is being closed. Everything's changed. We are marching through the streets. People line up on both sides. Most of them won't even dare look at us. They yell things like, "Good for you, Jews. Wind up on the bottom, got what you deserved." They take us to a convent nearby. We stand in that courtyard, raining for 2 days. We're then taken to another room. I see that my former boss at the Gestapo is in there. He knows who I am. They begin sorting. They send my aunt to one side. I am sent to another. I try to help her, but I can't find her. And everyone around me tells me, if you go to the other side, there is no turning around. All the older people and the young children are in that line. We're then taken to the trains. It's pitch black. We've been standing in this car for a long time. I'm with a lot of young people that I knew back from Vilna, from the ghetto. Sometimes the train will just slow down and we'll hear noises. We don't know what's happening. I think the Germans are doing that to scare us, to turn us into despair. A friend of mine is able to escape. I don't know what's going to happen to my friend. We keep going for a long time like that. Finally, the train slows down and stops. The doors open. It's night, but we can see flashlights pointing at us. We are received by what is called a welcoming party. Germans and their dogs, they just throw the dogs at us. Get out, get out. We get out of the train. We get into a line. You're all going into the showers. Showers? Everyone starts crying and hollering. We know what it means. We're all gonna die. So we walk in line. When we get there, I don't even mind the cold water. It is an actual shower. They're not killing us. After the showers are done, they give me my uniform. I put it on. We go outside and it's already dawn. They organize us into lines. I wait a little bit, and then we start walking. They show us our barracks. I enter and I start looking around. I want to find a place that I can settle down, a bed for me. As I'm looking, I see this face in the corner. It's a familiar face. The hair is not the same, and there is no lipstick, but I remember her. She's from Vilna. I used to envy her, actually, a little bit. She is very beautiful. She wore that lipstick that was very adventurous, and all the boys would carry this stuff for her. I see that she recognizes me, and I walk toward her. Hello. What happened? I lost all my family. So did I. And at that moment, we become family to each other. I discovered that where we are is Kaiserwald, a concentration camp in Riga, Latvia. She has a very good job there. She sorts clothes, so she's able to get me in that job as well. But I can see that although we are in that place, wearing those clothes, not able to take care of ourselves, she's still gorgeous. And all the prisoners and the guards, they try to talk to her. We continue with our days, of course. One day, not long after I had arrived there, maybe a couple of months, I get back to our barrack from my shift sorting clothes. She's not there. Get a little bit worried. I wait a little bit and then I start asking around. Hey, do you know where she is? What happened? Finally, someone tells me she was taken to the ghetto. And I knew what it meant. She was dead. Another loss after my parents, my siblings, my aunt, now her as well, who had become my family. I'm worried that I might be the next one. So I see this line of people, of women, going somewhere outside the ghetto. I just joined them. And we just march outside the camp. Two years later, death still hounds me. I'm at Stutthof, a concentration camp in Danzig, Germany. One of my jobs there is to pile up dead bodies that will be taken to cremation. It's spring 1945. I'm at the infirmary because I'm very sick and very frail. The camp is almost empty. Most of the people were taken in January outside. We don't know what happened. Those of us who were sick stayed behind. My cousin is also there. I found him at Stutthof. One day, as we were in the infirmary, the door opens. It's a German guard. Out, everyone now. We had heard rumors. The Soviets were getting close to where we were. They take us to the edge, to the Baltic Sea. They board us all into boats. They're trying to take us somewhere else. As we are boarding into the boat, we are being attacked from the air as well. We are in German boats after all. I just hear bullets all around. As we are in the boat, standing there, the Germans, they install a bomb outside the boat, and they leave us there to die. We are continuing to being attacked. It's bullets everywhere. Some Norwegians arrive. We don't know where they came from, but they are able to deactivate the bomb. And they start bringing us back close to shore. As we arrive closer, they tell us, this is as far as we can go. From here, you have to swim. I look at my cousin. I was sick and frail, but he was way worse than me. I look into his eyes. I don't know if he's gonna make it. He looks at me and he says, Beba, remember the date. May 6, 1945. I take one last look at him and I go to the edge of the boat. I jump into the water. All of a sudden, everything is very silent and I just swim. I emerge close to the beach. I can see the trees. They're all green in the forest. I can feel the heaviness of the wet uniform on my back, on top of me. I walk towards the beach. I can feel the sand under my feet. I just start running. There's still bullets everywhere. I can hear that now there are crackling wood beside me. I keep running and running as much as I can. Everything turns black. When I open my eyes, I'm at a hospital. I'm informed that this is a British hospital in Germany. Is it over? Was I able to survive?
Thank you, Carolina. That was powerful, and the surprise at surviving is a strong ending there. For those of you listening, please put some appreciations for Carolina in the chat. This is how we do things. We tell our storytellers how much we love them because they're so wonderful, and how their stories made us feel. So please do so in the chat. Carolina, can you tell us a little bit about this? Since we're talking here about both stories and the museum exhibitions, can you tell us a little bit about how that story connects to your exhibition?
Yeah, absolutely. So the exhibitions of the online museum, they are based on the stories of people, and then we connect history and artifacts and everything that was going on at the time to that specific story of that person. So we go from micro to macro all along the exhibition. And our first exhibition is all of Beba Epstein's story, which is the story I just told. And this is just a little part. So this is her experience during the war, but we talk about her life before, during, and after the Holocaust. We focus a lot on her life before. We have 10 chapters. The first 6 are all about her pre-war life, which we based on her autobiography that is part of the YIVO archives. And then her war experience, we were able to get it together from a lot of sources. Our main source was, of course, her testimony. She left her testimony for the Los Angeles Holocaust Testimonial Projects, which was in conjunction with the Shoah Foundation. But we also have some other documents. So when the war was just over, she wrote a letter to her uncle that she was able to find, who lived here in New York. And she tells an abbreviated version of what happened to her in that letter. So then I know that some people, they talk about how testimonies that are given when the person is very old, that there might be things that are not very accurate. But in her specific case, We have this letter that is from 1945 to testify, you know, everything. It's just like a very summarized version because it's a letter, of course, but she goes into a lot of detail from everything in her testimony from 1984, I believe, is when she did it.
Neat. Okay. That's really neat. So I encourage everybody to go check out this exhibit. It's YIVO, museum.yivo.org, is that right?
It's
Carolina?
museum.yivo.org. Yeah. And one thing that I think is very interesting about her experience is that this is just a short version of everything that went on with her. Beba actually went through a lot during the war, and this is why I thought she was an interesting case for Holocaust education specifically. We developed the exhibition to be a K-12 tool for Holocaust education. And she's hiding, she's in the ghetto, she's in a concentration camp, she works at a munitions factory. So she goes through a lot of different experiences and places there. And so we think this is why it's a very powerful tool for education. I'm going to leave the link to the exhibition here. And another thing that's very exciting is that today we launched the Lithuanian translation of the Beba Epstein exhibition, which we're all very excited about. And it just came out. Yeah. That's
very exciting. That's very exciting. We will hear more about that exhibition when we talk to Jonathan in a little while. Thank you, Carolina. We're going to turn now to our second story from Nokuzola Bikwana. Nokuzola is an educator at the Cape Town Holocaust and Genocide Center, and she will be sharing a story from the life of Leyb Rosenthal. Leyb Rosenthal was a prolific writer of plays, poems, and songs. He was born in 1916 in Lithuania, where he lived with his parents, Fruma and Nahuma, and his younger sisters, Hyla and Miriam. The story Nokuzola is going to tell is based on information that Leyb's niece, Zola, who is here with us tonight, gathered from the documents that her mother, Hyla, had saved. Unfortunately, we have no first-person testimony from Leyb himself. After the war, however, Leyb's sister Hyla, Zola's mother, wrote out many of his poems, and Nokuzola is going to incorporate several lines from some of these poems from I Long for Home, We Live Forever, and Yisroelek. Nokuzola, whenever you're ready.
I long for home. With life carefree, the hours flee. I stand aside and think. Man, I'm sure, has his place, his fare, his warm bed, nothing more. My home is marred for me. My home is barred to me. I wander all about, and I must do without. If only I had my humble home. I long for home. I'm a writer. I'd been a writer since I was 14. I got inspired in my writing by all the conversations that my parents, Nahuma and Fruma, used to have with their friends that used to visit my home. They would have long cultural discussions. Those inspired me. Those made me have pride in who I am. Those cultural discussions made me have pride in my Jewishness. One day, when one of my father's friends, Mr. Grossbud, visited my home, I decided to give him some of my poems to read. He got so impressed by what I wrote, and he inspired me to write. Through him and his encouragement, I became published in the Vilna Express, as well as the magazine, Die Tijd, the Times. I was 14 then. It's 1935 now, and I'm in Lida. Lida is now my home. In Lida, I'm still a writer, and I am a credited writer. I decide in 1935 that my writing has to evolve, that my writing has to move with the worldview. From this 35 up to 1936, I realized that my worldview is actually changing. I'm beginning to embrace more socialist philosophy. I begin to become political. I get to understand more about the world. I begin to want to criticize. I want to criticize governments, particularly fascist governments that oppress humanity, that are taking away people's freedom of expression. I want to be who I am. I want to be able to express my views. My writings and my criticism is putting me in trouble with the Polish police. I get sent in and out of jail, but I have my pen, and it is in my writing that my voice will be heard. It's 1939. With the Red Army invading Poland, I am so elated. I know that I'm going to praise more the socialism that I've embraced. I begin to praise the army and the army men. I begin to praise the people who are bringing this freedom to us. But wait, my joy, my happiness is very short-lived. The Nazis are here. I get home one day. I'm told by my mother and my sister Miriam, as well as Chayela, to get dressed up. They give me items of clothing. I look at them. These are girls' clothes. They tell me to quickly dress up. I, Leyb, who is born a boy, has to dress up as a girl to hide away from the Nazis. They tell me that my father, Nahum, is among the very first people to be taken away by the Nazis to the Ponari forest. He's murdered there. I've never seen my father again. My community is now moved from where we are. We're sent into this Vilna Ghetto where we are now confined. I long for home. And this Vilna Ghetto, though, I know that I still have my mighty pen. And it is in this mighty pen that I'm still going to write. I have my songs, I have my poems that I know will give back the semblance of life to my people. The long cultural conversations that my parents used to have with their friends have made me understand and believe in my Jewishness, in who I am, and have pride in myself. I write. Yisraelik. My sister Chayela sings the song beautifully. Yisraelik is about this orphan boy who finds himself in this Vilna Ghetto. He's lost everything. He doesn't have shoes. He's got a tattered coat. There is a Yisraelik in each and every one of us. Because in this ghetto that we find ourselves in, we have lost. Like Yisraelik, there's so much that we have lost. My writing and my plays will give my people what they can still remember, their culture. It will give my people hope. In my play, Moshe, hold on. My people will hold on. And this Vilna Ghetto, my people are being moved. Daily, I see them disappearing. But wait, I don't know what will happen tomorrow. I need to do something. My friends, Abraham and Shemech, work with the paper brigade. It is with a paper brigade that will aim to do three things. We will preserve our culture. We'll collect all the memoirs, smuggle some documents out with the hope that one day those will be retrieved. And we hope that one day, if none of us survive, all that was hidden through the paper brigade will be imparted. My people, we still have our songs that give us the semblance of life. My song, We Will Live Forever, has words in them that I want you to remember. We live forever. The world's ablaze. We live forever without money these days. We will show the enemy that we won't play the game. We will show the enemy that we will not hide our faces in shame. We are Jews. We will live forever. Here we are. We long for home, but we will live forever. Here we are. We are still here. Merzene do. Wait. Some of us have been moved to the Kluger camp And here in the Kluger camp, our energy, our strength is drained from us. My humanity has been taken away. And now we've been moved again to the Ponari forests. I long for home. I do not know what will happen to me. But my people, be that Moshe and hold on. We are still here and we will live forever.
Thank you, Zola. Before I give you an appreciation, I need to finish out your story because you can't, of course, tell us, but Leyb was murdered along with thousands of others from the Vilna Ghetto in the Ponari forest in September 1944, a day before liberation. Zola, I felt the soul of this poet come out through you. That's all I can say. That was absolutely beautiful. Please, again, put your appreciations in the chat. As you're doing so, please try to make sure that you send them to everyone and not just to the hosts and panelists so that everybody can see and share in the appreciations for our storytellers. And before I ask Zoe this question, I want to let you know that stick around to the end of the program, because at the very end of the program, we are going to play that song, We Live Forever, sung by Zola, his niece, who is here with us, as recorded on a video on YouTube. So we're going to play that for you at the end of the program. Zola, can you tell us a little bit about how this story connects with the exhibition?
So Leyb's story is based on Chayla's story, which was a traveling exhibition that we had at our center. When we are doing school programs, we try to give life as much as possible to the stories, the survivors as people who perished during the Holocaust. Now, personally, as one of the educators, when I was teaching, the Chayla's story, I got more touched by Leyb's. Not that I undermined Chayla, who survived the Holocaust, but something in me yearned to have Leyb talking. As I became the student that I was teaching, and I began to ask myself questions as to, if I was Leyb, how would I be feeling? Of course, I would never really understand, but something yearned in me to give him a voice, to have the voice. Of course, at the time I did not know how, but I knew that in telling his story, I would just try as much as I can to get into his emotions, into his fears, particularly into his writing. Because what stood out for me is the fact that he wanted to do this more than anything else. So it became a coincidence that Jennifer and Oli approached me, that I'd do a story. And I said to them, you know what, I will personalize Leyb's story. Of course, became a challenge a bit because I did not have any, first person's point of view from Leyb. But with Zola's help, I tried, trying to find out as to how Zola's mother maybe, said something about Leyb and, how she thought her mother might have felt when she gave Zola, Leyb stories. So this is how, from my side, I thought in imparting this to our learners, Leyb's story is personalized through what I've just shown to you all. I hope that it did make sense. Yeah,
it did. We're about to go to our panel, but before we do, I want to bring Zola on for a moment to respond to this. Zola, I'm putting you on the spot here because we hadn't planned this, but I wanted to give you a chance to respond to Nokuzola's telling, and just tell us what you thought and how you're feeling here.
Verklempt. I'm so emotionally moved. What you just did was remarkable. My sister wrote the play about my mother, and her first title of the play was Finding My Mother's Voice. And today, Nokuzola, you gave my uncle his voice. You found his voice and you shared it with us so beautifully, so powerfully. And I thank you, and I know that he thanks you. From places deep in my soul that I can't even get to and access. I have no more words. These are huge love and appreciation tears. You blew us away today. Thank you. Amazing.
Thank you, Zola, and I apologize for putting you on the spot, but very appreciate your response, because that really validates what we're doing here. So let's turn to our panel, Jonathan Brent, Richard Freedman, and as we switch the spotlights, if you have questions for Jonathan or Richard or any of the presenters today, put them in the chat and we will try to get to them as we get through the program a little later in the program. So Jonathan and Richard, I'd like each of you to tell us a little bit about the exhibition that we're talking about, what inspired it, and how you see storytelling woven into the exhibition. Jonathan, let's start with you. You are muted.
Thank you so much. Thank you for those beautiful presentations that were so moving. YIVO, the YIVO Institute, as many of your listeners may know already, contains 24 million documents. Most of them are in Polish, Yiddish, Hebrew, German, Russian, Ukrainian, Lithuanian. They're in every European language. And some years ago, we began a project of digitizing all of those documents, which in Zoe's presentation, she referred to as the paper brigade. She referred to the paper brigade. And these are the documents that the paper brigade saved. They saved them either by hiding them in the Vilna Ghetto, or they saved them by giving them to the Germans, and the Germans then took them to Germany, and they were found after the war by the US Army. And the consequence is that these remarkable materials have been divided ever since. And during the whole period of the Cold War, no one had any idea of what actually existed in Lithuania, Vilnius today. After the fall of the Soviet Union, it was discovered that approximately 1 million documents had been saved by the paper brigade, and many books, among which were the memoir of Beba Epstein, which Carolina referred to. And so we undertook this mammoth project that took 7 years and many millions of dollars to, first of all, preserve all of these materials, and then to digitize them, and then to reunite them digitally on a single platform, so that you in Cape Town, or if you're in Moscow, or if you're in Shanghai, can all look at the same bit of material, the same documents at the same time, and study them. And we were very proud of this. And when the project was finally finished, our board assembled, and I started showing the board the documents, and everybody was extremely happy, ecstatic. And then I looked at their faces, and I saw blank faces. Why? Because they can't read Yiddish. They don't Russian. They can't read Polish. They can't make out Fraktur. They have no idea about Romanian and all of the other multiple languages that these materials are in. And it was at that moment that I had the idea, we have to translate these materials, and we have to put them online, so you don't have to go to Lithuania to see them, so that anyone in the world can have access if they know English. And English is much better known, frankly, than Polish, pardon to my Polish friends, or Yiddish. And so that was the birth of the online, the Francesca Czernia online museum. The idea was to take documents such as the memoir of Beba Epstein, translate it into English, and then the question was, what are you going to do with it? And this is where Carolina's brilliance comes in, because she had the concept of telling the story of it, and at the same time embedding that story in a very complete context of other documents, which also would be translated, or at least partially translated, so that people can understand the, what the Germans call the Umwelt, the surrounding world of this story. Because to tell a story means to put the facts into a context that makes sense, and that has a beginning, a middle, an end, that has variation, and that one can understand and appreciate. And it's essential for the YIVO Institute to bring not only the facts of that person's life into the story, but the facts of the world in which that person lived. And for this, the huge resources of the YIVO Institute then became essential. And so we drew on all of the almost 2 million documents, 2.5 million documents that we had digitized in the Vilna Collections Project, and the books, and other materials that are in the YIVO Institute to create this narrative, which eventually became, under Carolina's guidance, the exhibition, the first exhibition devoted to Beba Epstein. We were very lucky that, in fact, we had her uncle's entire archive here at YIVO, and the immigration records and a variety of other materials associated with her eventual coming to the United States, and her testimony, which we were fortunate to be able to use in this. But I want to end by stressing one thing in Zoe's reading of Leyb Rosenthal's work. We will survive. Why will we survive? We will survive because people will hear our voice. What does that mean? What it means is that this agglomeration of cultural artifacts that we possess carries our culture forward. We are each individuals, but we're all part of this culture. And the great result of the Paper Brigade was that they saved this culture. Where can the culture be found? You can't find it in Poland. You cannot find it in Germany. You cannot find it in France. You cannot find it in Russia, frankly. It is in these materials that the Paper Brigade saved, connected with other materials in the YIVO archives. And so it is our obligation at YIVO to put these online, to create these exhibitions, because frankly, after the Holocaust, the Jewish people, as much as we revere the words of Doigkeit, of the Bund, we are here, the Jewish people worldwide were deprived of their cultural heritage through that catastrophe. And life for my generation was essentially a cultural wasteland. That is what the purpose of the online museum is.
Thank you. Thank you. And it really shows us how much work, how much background you need to have to be able to create an exhibition like that. It's not a simple thing. Richard, would you tell us a little bit about the Cape Town exhibition?
Yes, thank you. But first of all, I just want to also thank Carolina and Nokazola for the rendering of their stories. And I have to say that the methodology is really very powerful. And I am very grateful to have been exposed to it like this. I do think that for the storytellers, taking on these stories without really any kind of direct connection to the story itself is an incredible work of dedication and sensitivity. And I am deeply impressed that they put themselves into that really very difficult place of rendering the story in the way they did. And I am appreciative of the fact that it must be a really very difficult thing to do. And whilst they are not survivors telling their stories, they are both young women who have taken on this role. And you know, as many people said in the comments, it was as if the person was there, as if they were listening to the person themselves. And I think this is where the power of this kind of storytelling lies. So thank you to both of you. In terms of our exhibition, and I should say exhibitions, we have, of course, a core exhibition, which is very much contextualized in the South African story, not only in terms of South Africa as a place where there were gross human rights violations over many decades, even hundreds of years, which contextualize our exhibition. We acknowledge that nobody can come into our exhibition without an entrance narrative, and that entrance narrative is very much informed by the context in which we find ourselves. So the exhibition has that element. It tells the story in very simply of the kind of parallels that existed between Nazi Germany before the war and the kind of laws that were implemented even after the war in South Africa. So no lessons were taken from that experience. So that's very much the kind of context, but it's also contextualized through the use of narratives which come from South African survivors who made their home in South Africa after the war and who have shared their stories with us, shared their documents with us, given testimony. And so it was very important for us to use that testimony in our exhibitions in order to do what Jonathan has said, and that is to make them, in a sense, accessible, make it accessible. And so the people working with the exhibition use those testimonies. Some of them are written, so they have to be taken off the wall, so to speak, and brought into the programs. And the others are actually video testimonies, which are a very important aspect of both our permanent exhibition and of our education programs. So that's extremely important. As far as the Chayla Rosenthal exhibition, Chayla, Wunderkind of the Vilna Ghetto, as she was known, this exhibition is really just a remarkable and exciting process that we embarked upon. And it would not have happened without Zola. Zola really has been in a sense, the keeper of her family history, as was her sister, her late sister. And the keeping of that family history allowed us to access it, and in her allowing us to access it, enabled us to create the exhibition that we did. An exhibition which used the story, the incredible story before, during, and after the war, but which really was again contextualized in the history of the time. So somebody asked me today, how can you use an exhibition like that? My response was that actually you can tell the story of the Holocaust through just about any testimony that comes from the period. It's that testimony which can actually enable you to segue into the understanding, or at least some kind of understanding of what it is. So this powerful personal story, which formed the basis of this exhibition, based on wonderful photographs that Zola had of documents of her sister's work in it before the engagement with Vilna through actual visits and so on. All of this is reflected in the exhibition, so that one has a sense of both the historical and the contemporary, of the kind of intergenerational process which made this exhibition extraordinary. That it is, yes, historical characters, a very sad and disturbing story, but at the same time, this incredible story of hope and resilience, which comes out through the very personal story that was told.
Thank you, and thank you for the segue, because the idea of taking a story and drawing it through an exhibition and a guided tour is exactly the way we have thought about guiding. And I want to bring Lynn on now, because Lynn is a specialist in using oral storytelling in guiding in a museum setting. So I want Lynn to tell us a little bit about how she does this, how you use storytelling when guiding in a museum, Lynn, and then I'll come back to Jonathan and Richard to get to talk a little bit about how you see those things going together with your exhibitions. Lynn, talk to us.
So I just want to start by saying that Richard's thought of using a personal story to teach the Holocaust is exactly what I do when I guide. When I guide, whether it's Yad Vashem or any exhibition or monument or Poland, which is one big exhibition, one could say, I believe in drawing through the whole history through 2 or 3 testimonies that can connect my guided group into the story. Once we tell a personal story, we create not just the interest and not just the emotional connection, but also we make this very personal for our audience, for our groups. So if I start a story pre-war, because Jews weren't born victims, they had a life before the war, I will start by sharing small parts of these 3 testimonies that I chose to tell. And I try always to also pick one that is based on a diary or letters from somebody who did not survive. And I will carry that through. So I'll use Yad Vashem as an example, but I'll carry that through all through the museum and bring in, together with the historical framework that the museum actually gives us, with the photos and the little captions that we have on the walls and whatever artifacts, I'll bring in those stories as appropriate. And I have found that ever since I started using the storytelling technique, which is a bit different from reading a text, but actually telling a story, the reactions of our groups are always so immersed in the story. And my main thing to every group that I guide is, if you remember one of these stories, I've done my job. Because then you'll go home and you'll tell that story to somebody else. And maybe that somebody else will tell that story further and further. And the memory of the Holocaust, whether it's the survivors or the ones who didn't, will carry on through us telling these stories.
Thank you, Lynn. So I want to go back to our panel and talk about how do we see oral storytelling, like what Lynn was talking about, like what we've heard tonight, as complementing the written storytelling that you see in the online exhibits, in the exhibit when you walk through. How do the oral storytelling and the written storytelling complement each other in your exhibitions? Jonathan, let's start with you again.
In our first exhibition, there is both an oral side as well as a written side. The oral side has two parts. In the second part, Beba herself is telling her story. That is of the Holocaust itself. But in the early part, through animations, we have a child Beba as a child, telling her story through the memoir that she wrote at the age of 14. And it is obvious that it is through the heard word that the most emotional connection can be made with a reader, with an audience, with someone you wish to influence in some way. And I think that, Carolina, I think that you would agree, you invented it. And maybe you could talk even a little bit more about your thoughts on this.
Sure. Thank you, Jonathan. I think you laid out very well already. But I think that what I would add is that storytelling is the basis of the exhibition. It's about telling her story, and then through her story, connecting the context, as Jonathan explained before. But I think the main motivation was that, okay, we wanted to reach a younger audience, and we have all of these documents, but how are we going to make them connect to it in some way? They don't need to feel represented by it, but just connect to it somehow. And storytelling was the best way that we found to do this. So, you could see, if we just showed you Beba's autobiography, it's like, okay, it's a bunch of old papers. Why should I care about this? But when you tell her story, and then you see who Beba is, and then you see what she went through. So, for example, in her autobiography, she was talking about how, she loved her parents. She would fight with her siblings all the time. Her grandparents were constantly sick. But she loved them all so much, and she hoped that one day she would go to university. What would be her career? What would she do with her life? And we think this is something that kids nowadays could connect, independent of their background. It's something that they could connect to, and then, okay, I want to learn more. And then when you want to learn more about her story and who Beba is and what she went through, then it's like, but why did this happen? So then that's when you go to context and everything that was happening around you.
Thank you, Carolina.
In addition, by the way, I just to add one more thing for those of you who might be interested in exploring this online exhibition, there are also embedded as part of the as an element of the documents that we use, songs, poems. We have an actor reading in Yiddish, various things. And so we have made a real attempt at embedding this story in a world, in an understandable world.
Yeah, it's a remarkable exhibit. If you haven't seen it, you should definitely go look. Richard, what do you think? You are muted.
As we move further and further away from having our dear survivors with us, we have to find a voice. And that voice is really largely through, in our case, through our educators. We have second generation and hopefully third generation too, who will be willing to tell the stories of their own relatives. Of course, that is extremely powerful and very, very immediate. But the educators, we don't always have that luxury. And so the educators need to know and understand these stories. They need to make it their business to be able to tell the stories at the specific moments in the exhibition, which helps to make that connection. So yes, we have videos in the exhibition. For example, we have a wonderful short video of a woman called Rachel Herzl, who stood at the ramp in 1944 as her family was being divided and sent to their deaths. And she relates her story. She talks about being there. She talks as if she was there. And of course, it's extremely powerful. So that's a great tool. That's a great tool. But we don't have many of those. And we have worked, the center in Cape Town is 25 years old. Even at the best of times, we had very few survivors that were able to come in and share their stories. So we had to make it our business to work without survivors. And I think that has really actually, in a sense, helped us now. We know the importance of the personal story. We know to make those kinds of connections, and we've been doing it for a very long time. But I know that Orly Barnett, who is the education director of the center, is with us this evening, and I really would like her just to comment on that aspect of our use of the exhibition through bringing these stories to life, and how she works with her volunteers and her colleagues to engage with that. So perhaps, Orly, you'd like to say a few words.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you to everyone who's here today. I'd also like to congratulate our storytellers for the incredible work that they've done in coming here today to present a finished work, or a work in process, you might still think, but the unbelievable love and care and attention that each speaker, each storyteller has given today, with the support of Teach the Shoah, with the support of Jennifer, our amazing storytelling coach, who is a huge talent in her own right. The work that takes to be so brave as to share a story that we have no real understanding of what it would be like to experience ourselves, but still manage to convince the audience that it happened and it is real, and that we feel like we were there. It's just an amazing feat. And I think I'd like to only just add that, really, because I think, Richard, you've done an amazing job of explaining how we use the exhibition through testimony throughout, that, it weaves throughout our exhibition, and how important it is for us. But I think that the ability to tell the story like our storytellers have done today is what shows everybody else that they can also be torchbearers in telling the story. You don't have to be a survivor. You don't have to be second or third generation, although, as Richard mentioned, these are hugely powerful tools that we have. But actually anyone can pick up that torch, and actually anyone can decide to become a torchbearer of this history, and if they have enough courage, they can also share stories with some support, of course. And when we tell stories in our exhibition and we mention who they are attributed to, the survivors have made their lives in Cape Town, and we show their images and we explain that they live around the corner, or that they're now 102 years old, or that they passed away sadly the year before, that is where we really make connections with our students, which we call learners. And when we receive their feedback at the end of the program, they often mention that the most important thing that they learned today are these stories. That is where they found moments of connection, by bringing these stories to life and making our students realize, or encouraging them to realize, that these stories happen to real people. Even though they are looking at imagery that is in black and white, these people really lived their lives in color, and it actually happened. It's not only a story, it's historical fact. And for me, I'll just add one last thing, which is on a personal note. I've been lucky enough to embark on a tour to Poland recently with the incredible educator Tali Nates, who's joined us here today. She's the director of the Johannesburg Holocaust Center, and she also is the descendants of survivors. Her father and her uncle were saved by Oskar Schindler. And one of the things that Tali did on this trip to Poland is that she brought along testimony. And everywhere that we went over the 10 days that we were there, whether it was a mass grave site, a ghetto, the site of a ghetto, the site of a Jewish village, the site of a Holocaust memorial, because it was a death camp, Tali brought with us stories from people who saw it with their own eyes. And while I was there, especially while we had the privilege to visit the Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial, I recalled having read some of the testimonies from diaries of Jewish victims who did not survive, from the Warsaw Ghetto, as well as from the Sonderkommando who worked in the Birkenau camp. Mm-hmm. And the common thread between these diaries was this call to the future, this dying wish that their stories would live on to tell what happened to them in their own words and not by the words of the perpetrators, because they didn't know that if they would survive. And of course, sadly, they didn't. And when I was standing there in Birkenau, and even when I stand in our own permanent exhibition, and when I'm here today, what I want to say is, we heard you. We heard you. We are telling your stories. 80 years later, we received your message. We're sharing it with the world. We've got this. We are going to keep that flame alight. And I'd like to thank everyone who's here today for being part of that journey.
Thank you, Orly. And Orly projected Teach the Shoah's motto, which is everyone can be a storyteller. And so to reflect that, I actually want to pull on our storytelling director, Jennifer Zunikov, to give us a little overview of what goes into telling these stories and why it is that we say that everybody, and Orly says that everybody can be a storyteller. Jennifer, just a couple of minutes.
Sure. Thank you, everyone. Again, congratulations, Mazel Tov to Zoe and Carolina, and for everyone to come here together and share these stories, and for this to be community, to do this in community. So I really believe that it's not even a belief anymore. It's knowing from decades of doing this work, from working with people who have a lot of experience with public speaking to absolutely none, people from all ages, all backgrounds, people who really knew about the Holocaust before I worked with them, to people who just knew the bare minimum. Every single person I have worked with has been able to do this, and to do it without notes. And so I want you all to know that the women you heard today, except for a few lines from Rosenthal's work, everything else that you heard was done without notes. They learned this story and held it in their bones. So that's what happens when you start telling and practicing and being appreciated, like all of you here did in community. Then you start knowing, I can do this. I need to do this. And we need everyone. So the one thing I want to say is that the storytelling process is really happening internally first. You know how we're always taught, be a good listener, right? From the time we're a young child. Well, the first thing we do as storytellers is we are good listeners to the story inside of us. So we're hearing, of course, from the primary source, or reading an original letter or piece of text, or we're hearing oral testimony. but then that is reverberating inside of us. And we each have our unique perceptive capabilities that help inform how that story kind of slides into who we are. And then we speak from the place where the story meets our story. And so that's how it all starts. And we get so excited. Other people listen to us, they get inspired, and they say, wait, maybe I could do this too. So we're here to say you can. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Sure. Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, yes, Lynn, the answer is yes. So Richard, Jonathan, any last thoughts as we close out our program?
Well, I think this is a very exciting initiative. I think that it helps to answer a lot of where we are going to be going from here. And I think that the more people we can bring, and I think it's very important that we use original documents, that we try and use memoirs, that we try and use the narration that comes off the testimonies that we've heard from survivors as they tell their story. It's that kind of integrity which needs to be there. It needs to, my one concern is that the dramatization and so on can sometimes interfere with the narrative. But what we've seen from our two examples this evening is this incredible integrity. And that's the word that I would like to use, the integrity that is associated with this incredible responsibility that goes with giving oral testimony when it's not your own.
Absolutely. And the integrity is a very good word. It is essential that we stick as close to the testimony as we can, which is actually why we told you before Zoe's story that we don't have first person testimony from Leyb. And it's important to recognize that, to know what we have and to know what we don't have. But as you say, it's important to stay as close as we can to the testimony and not go off in flights and fancy, because it has to be we have to be telling the true story. We have to be telling the true story in their voice as much as we can. Jonathan, any last thoughts?
I have a couple. And first of all, I truly, deeply appreciate the project of storytelling that you've undertaken. I think it's essential. I see it as a beginning and not necessarily an end, but necessary beginning. That is to say, to get people to understand the human dimension of this. It was so lost for decades after the Holocaust began. It was only in really the 1970s that the great Holocaust historian Raoul Hilberg even recognized the value of this testimony. He wrote The Destruction of European Jewry entirely from the standpoint of the Nazi machinery, not from the standpoint of the survivors. And there are a couple of things also that I want to say about this, which is that these memoirs often turn up extraordinary details that one couldn't possibly expect. One expects the horrible sense of loss. One expects the horrible sense of dislocation. One expects the fear of death and the starvation and all of that. But one doesn't necessarily expect Leyb to talk about the extraordinary power of these words, that it is the words that are going to survive. And that is so important. And the same is true in little Beba's memoir. Little details in the memoir. For instance, she writes in her memoir about the first film that she ever saw in Vilnius. And it's astonishing because it wasn't a Jewish film at all. It was the silent the silent film of Uncle Tom's Cabin. Imagine, in the Jewish theater in Vilnius in 1932, they're playing the silent version of Uncle Tom's Cabin. Now imagine, if you are a cultural historian or even thinking at all about what the Jewish community of Vilnius was, think about that detail for a minute. Think about for a minute the fact that in her memoir at the bottom, and she's 14 years old, she says, I do want to go to the university, but anti-Semitism is so great in Poland right now. Maybe I'll have to go to Paris. I was 20 years old. It never occurred to me to go to Paris. I didn't know where Paris was. The chutzpah of this little girl, and the ambition, the cultural ambition of this little girl.
Yes.
It tells you so much. So these are all reasons why these memoirs need to be read, need to be incorporated in this project that you have, and that I hope we are in some way complementing with our online museum.
Absolutely, very much so.
Can I
Richard?
just say one more thing, Deborah? I teach a Melton course on Holocaust memoirs and diaries. And of course, the Melton technique is to get people to read whatever the text is. And of course, these texts are these diaries and memoirs. And it has such a profound effect upon not only the reader, but also the listener, to bring it off the page, to articulate it even as a reading, because very soon you get into the spirit of what is beneath the surface. And as Jonathan says, those details that come out, which often surprise one, take one completely aside from your kind of trajectory that you are on in terms of your understanding of Holocaust history.
Yes.
So just more of the same, but it's important that there are other ways of doing this too, and that these are happening as we speak.
Yes. And one of the things that I love about teaching this through these individual stories, whether through reading the memoirs or the online exhibits or the kind of storytellings we've been doing, is the details, the nuances in the story, the recognition that every person who experienced the Holocaust has a different story. Every person experienced it in a unique way, and their story is not going to look like anybody else's, and the details are going to tell you all kinds of things about the culture in the Jewish community then that you do not get from seeing the 10,000-foot view that we usually see. So thank you both. I actually, before we end, I want to bring on Zola and let her have the last word before we actually then go to getting to watch her sing one of Leyb's songs. Lynn, would you spotlight Zola? Do you have a thought on the conversation that we've been having?
Oh, we don't have time for all my thoughts. It's been so powerful, so amazing, and just reminds me again how powerful my sister's work was before people were really putting on plays and telling personal stories other than, the Sobols and Spielbergs, because she wrote a play about my mother's life. And she does it in first person, and it's free on YouTube. I encourage you to go and see it. And the power of that storytelling. And she performed it all over the world, including in Vilnius, which she did in Yiddish, on the same stage that my mother performed the play. And she sang Leyb songs on that same stage. Wow. And the personal storytelling is what is the most powerful and accessible to people, because when we know someone, we connect. And when you bring the personal story through voice, you connect and you suddenly know that person, and that person's life becomes important and is accessible to share, in addition to the photographs and memoirs. And it was even growing up as a child of survivors. I heard their stories, I listened, I saw and got the documents, and my father had all these boxes of papers, and because he was a journalist, so he wrote and wrote and wrote about his experience and the Holocaust all through his life, which is why we had such a rich collection, because he kept every single piece of paper. And he told the stories, and the personal stories, when he told them, were so much more interesting than the facts and this picture or that picture. And it just made it accessible. So we do have to continue. And I'm so grateful for everything that YIVO is doing, and for every single person who is telling the stories, every educator. And just keep doing what you're doing. And I will continue to do my part, which I did not do until after my sister passed, because she was the main torchbearer. So I've learned the power of storytelling and will continue to share. But thank you all.
Thank you so much, Zola. I want to point out one thing. Tali Nates just commented in the chat. This exhibit is now in Johannesburg. So if you missed it in Cape Town, go see it in Johannesburg. I'm sure it is equally powerful there. And Zola, if you have a chance, somebody requested that you put the name of the play in the chat so that people can go look for it. But before you do that, I'm going to introduce this video, and I want you to tell me how to pronounce this. So I'm going to play a video of you singing "We Live Forever," written by your uncle Leyb in the Vilna Ghetto in 1943. First sung on the stage in the Vilna Ghetto Theater by your mother, Chayala, during the war. Is that true that she sang it during the war?
Yes, in the ghetto. Yes, it was in the ghetto times. Yeah.
So tell me how you pronounce it. Pronounce the Yiddish for me, please.
Mir Leben Ebek.
Mir Leben Ebek. Okay, so I'm going to share this, and thank you all for an amazing program, and thank you all for coming and for attending and for listening and sharing this evening with us. So let me make sure I share my sound. And here we go.
We live forever, the world's ablaze. We live forever, without money these days. We'll show the enemy we will not play their game, and we will not hide our faces in shame. We'll live forever, here we all are. We'll live forever, in every hour. We want to live and to survive. Bad times we'll overcome and thrive. We'll live forever, we are still here. Wir leben ewig, es brennt a Welt. Wir leben ewig, ohne Groschen Geld. Und euch zerpucken nicht die alles von ihm, was willen uns verschwarzen unser Ponym. Wir leben ewig in jeder Show. Wir leben ewig, wir seien da. Wir wollen leben und erleben schlechter Zeiten, aber überleben. Wir leben ewig, wir seien da. We are still here.
Gorgeous, Zola. Thank you so much. And with that, we will say good night, or good day, or good morning, whatever the time is for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. Bye.